Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and welcome to this week's episode of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. I am so thrilled to welcome my friend and former colleague, the Chief Administrative Officer of Montgomery County now, Rich Madaleno. Rich, thank you so much for taking the time from your busy schedule to have a chat with me.
Always plenty of time for Cheryl Kagan.
I want that. It's on record now.
The senator from Rockville and Gaithersburg.
That's perfect.
Where I am right now.
So I have a million questions I want to ask you. You have had an extraordinary career, even in your very young life. You've done so much. And so I want to do kind of the trajectory and the journey that you've had so far. And then we'll get to our Fast Five. So first, you started off, first off, you're from here, which is great. Like me, we grew up and we've seen the changes in Montgomery County, the challenges and the opportunities. Start by talking about your time as being one of the lobbyists in Annapolis for Montgomery County, the Office of Intergovernmental Relations. What was it like trying to be an advocate and to sell Montgomery County's priorities?
Sure, thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for having me. And I always find it interesting when I tell people you're talking about changes in Montgomery County. I grew up in Silver Spring. We had a cow farm in our backyard. Probably now, if you were to say that.
Wow.
No, we were in northern Silver Spring. I mean, right. That's, Silver Spring encompasses so much, but still, there were cows in Silver Spring. That it sort of succinctly talks about the changes in our community over the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. So, well, representing Montgomery County was, to me, it was a great thrill because, it was just at the beginning of the Duncan administration. And, there was a new, it seemed like there was a new vibe, within the executive office building. One of Doug's major priorities was to have us as a county government be more aggressive at going after state money, going after changes in state law. He wanted to be a player in Annapolis for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. He had seen that as mayor of Rockville, so he wanted to be aggressive, and I just had an opportunity of, here I was, a county native, a county resident, working in Annapolis, as you remember, as a member of the professional nonpartisan staff. So he and Ben Bialik, who was the chief lobbyist at the time, gave me the proverbial offer I could not refuse.
That's great.
And so I could join the county government and to work on a variety of things. And during those years, we fought for state money for the revitalization of Silver Spring, state money for Strathmore and the music hall, state money to totally redo Rockville, take mm-hmm. down the old mall, put in the street grid, redo the town center, all of these exciting things that fortunately I've been here and engaged long enough to see come to fruition and flourish and now often, need opportunities for their own refreshing, like the escalator at Strathmore or changes elsewhere.
Right. What was it like to try to convince other legislators who weren't from Montgomery County that our streets were not paved in gold?
Well, it was an interesting challenge because people had many of your colleagues at the time had a vision of Montgomery County right. that they first encountered it as. Mm-hmm. So, if they were, someone who I'll use, our friend, longtime Senate President Mike Miller, yes. Mike would tell very vivid stories of his courtship with Patty, who would become his wife, who grew up in Bethesda, and the Prince George's boy driving to Bethesda to try to woo the young Montgomery County teen girl, and it just, so that was the Montgomery County in his head. Right. And so you move forward 40 years, that is not the Montgomery County of 1995. It is not the Montgomery County of 2021. We are a fantastic community. We are a place that people want to come from around the world and live. I realize we have challenges that other jurisdictions would love to have, but still, this is a very different community than it was 40 years, 50 years, 20 years ago.
100%. Very quick story. The first time I met then Governor William Donald Schaefer, And I said, hello, Governor, I'm Cheryl Kagan. I live in Rockville. And he said, Rockville? Well, you must be a doctor then. I said, no, Governor, I'm not a doctor. He said, Rockville, then you must be a lawyer. No, Governor, I'm not a lawyer. So, well, if you're from Rockville, then you have to be a doctor. I mean, it was so offensive and
Right.
that stereotype that we were rich white folks, 2-parent households, and streets were paved in gold, and they are not. So then you ran for the House of Delegates and were elected from District 18.
Yes.
Was it hard going from being a nonpartisan person to a partisan person? And tell me how you enjoyed being in the House of Delegates.
Well, I had that transition. So for the 6 years I was part of the nonpartisan professional staff of the General Assembly, what I found so fascinating was it was an opportunity to really think about your issues. You know, I remember having to write a speech on the same subject for Pete Rawlings, longtime Democratic chair of the Appropriations Committee, and Martha Klima, conservative Republican from Baltimore County, because that was our job, was to provide those sorts of services, which then makes you have to think through all of these issues. So it made me think about my assumptions. And after that experience, it was like, oh, well, I thought I was a liberal before, and and I did welfare reform, for example, with Norm Conway and Marty Madden
from the Eastern Shore,
right? And Marty Madden, who was then Republican senator from Howard County, liberal. I mean, for a Republican, he was the Connie Morella type Republican, right? So, and I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to go into this and probably hear all these horror stories and come out being more cynical. And it was like, no, I actually came out saying like, oh, there are lots of ways we can help people, and we're not helping them where they need help because we've become overwhelmed with the bureaucracy and the rules and not actually, as I used to say, we're focused on paperwork, not social work. And so it helped inform my decision. And then that transition, obviously during those years where I was working here during the Duncan years, you're advocating for positions that Doug wanted to advocate for in the county council. And let's face it, they were always Democrats. So it was not that hard of a shift to move over into that partisan world. What was hard was, I remember one time where someone asked me a question about a policy issue and I gave my standard answer, and they're like, okay, great, you've just informed me, but I don't want to know about the issue. I want to know what's your position on the issue. And it's like, oh yeah, right. This isn't just about informing people about the policy. It is also then telling them what I'm going to do about this issue. And that transition took a while to say like, oh, I'm not an analyst. I am I am actually an advocate. I need to have a position.
Yeah. So speaking of transitions, then like me, you went from the House to the Senate, and I'm very sad that I never got to serve with you in the House, but we did overlap in the Senate, which was great. You served 12 years there. Tell me what you see, and people ask me all the time, what are the differences between the House and Senate? What would you say somewhere?
Well, it is a remarkable difference in that every committee in the House is larger than in the Senate. So you're one of how many? 28?
23.
In a House committee, you're one of 12, 11, 9, in the Senate. So much smaller group. So your vote is that much more powerful, influential, valuable in the debate. You are expected, if not encouraged, to participate in a range of issues. The House has, as you know, but I'll try to explain for listeners, the strong committee system, right? You're supposed to do your committee work, and then on the floor, support the committee. The second reader, don't vote for floor amendments for the most part. You support the other committees as they support you. In the Senate, I mean, I remember the first time but there's a recorded vote on a second reader? Like what? A bill can fail on second reading, and people don't know when a bill comes back to the floor, there are technically two votes. In the House, the one vote is always by voice. But in the Senate, there were roll calls, and bills died on that snap sort of vote on the second reader. And that just sometimes you had to get used to, oh, there's a different flow, and people want to hear you talk. In in the House, it's like, okay, you should speak once, during your first term. Maybe if you speak on the floor once during the whole session,
Right.
Whereas in the Senate, it's like, oh, speak every day, get up there, talk. It's more of a free flow of discussion, debate, dialogue. And
Yep.
so it was, it allowed you to get involved in so many more issues. The committee's portfolio is larger,
Yes.
but then, you're not, there's not the pressure to sit and be quiet on the floor as there is in the House. So it's very exciting because it's even more, you're more involved in every issue. And I know you must very much enjoy. I mean, I think we both enjoyed that environment.
So you, from the very beginning, became just the go-to smartest guy on budget issues. And at the end of your Senate career, you were vice chair of the Budget and Taxation Committee, so powerful, so influential. What is it about numbers and budgets that you find so appealing?
So it's so funny you should ask me that question, because I was just having a conversation with one of my colleagues where we were talking about, how did you get from, your, like when you walked in the door, and this has been on my mind because my daughter just graduated high school. So she's entering that next phase. And we were having this conversation of, okay, how is it you transition from like your childhood aspirations to this? And I was recalling the story of when I was finishing graduate school. So I have a master's in public administration. When I was finishing graduate school and sending out resumes, I purposely avoided any budget analyst job. I honestly, I would say to my friends, no budget job. I can't think of something more boring than becoming a budget analyst. So I just avoided them, to the point where I remember one of my friends was like, okay, your program's wrapping up. You don't have a job yet.
Right.
So you gotta like open up your standards. And I was like, oh, here's a budget analyst job at the Maryland General Assembly. I remember the career officer for the school handing me the job announcement that infamously Mark Nicole, who is now the deputy secretary of the Maryland Department of Budget Management, but was then a budget analyst who had gone to Syracuse University, had sent it in. She handed it to me and said, I know you're from Maryland, and can you think of a better place to work than Annapolis? And so I was like, okay, I'll send in the resume.
Right.
Got the job. It was the one job that got me out of my parents' house, right? So those things. And I just found it fascinating. And that everything runs, I mean, it's an obvious observation now, but to a 24-year-old, maybe it wasn't. Everything runs on money. You can pass all the laws you want, as you and I have both passed bills that created programs where we were like, woohoo, there's no dollars there. There's no program. It's just words on a piece of paper. So it's where, the budget is where, the goals actually meet reality as to what you're going to do. And I found it fascinating. And I found it was an area that so many other people came in wanting to, I'm going to fight about the environment, criminal justice, all very noble goals, but it's like everything flows through the budget. And because so many people, as I remember watching some people as a staff person, the budget used to come shrink wrapped, as you remember.
Yes.
And then watching on the last day of session, offices putting out their budget books in the recycling bin, still wrapped in the plastic. And it's like, wow, you just gave away so much of your authority. And you know this, you sat on the appropriations committee, the power of the budget. So I just wound up enjoying it, seeing the value of it, and seemingly having an aptitude for it.
Yeah. So my very first year in the House, my very first session, 1995, I had one of my very favorite bills ever. It was a one-sentence bill, and it was a policy bill. But ultimately, Nancy Kopp, now our state treasurer, got it enacted by withholding $1 million of funding. Until you fix this, you're not getting $1 million. And guess what? We fixed it. Yep. And so didn't pass the bill, got it done. And so it is, the power of the budget is huge.
Yes, people don't realize there are so many things, and to be fair, there's so many things you can get done through the budget. And the Maryland budget rules are so different than the federal government or even the county government, where the legislative bodies have far more power the state constitution grants the General Assembly. But there's still so many little things you could do. I always, our friend, our departed colleague, Pete Rawlings,
Yes.
always great at planting acorns, little seeds
Mm-hmm.
here or there about a study that would then lead to a bill, which would lead to a program, which would lead to, I remember that everything that stems from all the educational reforms of the last 20 years, the Thornton Commission and those formulas, the Kirwan Commission and the Blueprint for Maryland formulas, which you helped lead the charge to get enacted over Governor Hogan's veto, which will mean a revolution in public education for every child in the state.
Yep.
All of that I trace back to one report requirement in a joint chairman's report, which is this document that flows with the budget that probably most people don't know about, would roll their eyes, would fall asleep looking at the table of contents. But that document is so influential about so many different policy goals. And he was one of those people. You've been one of those people. Nancy Kopp has been one of those people who used that authority to pull strings, to push ideas that then led to major changes and major improvements for our residents, our community, our businesses.
Amen. So after 12 years in the Senate, you decided to run for governor.
What?
And we're a super thoughtful, effective, dynamic candidate for governor. But ultimately you were not successful. Any regrets about leaving the Senate? And tell me what you liked best and least about running for governor.
So sure, there are regrets because I think serving in elected office, serving in the General Assembly, you have a chance to work on so many things, to get so much done. Find good people like you to build coalitions and make improvements in the community. And it is remarkable, the transformation over the time that you and I have have the honor to serve in elected office, the changes that we've brought about, which I think have only made this a better, stronger, wealthier, more successful, happier community. What I loved about the campaign was, to me, so much of campaigning is about educating voters too. It's about, going to community meetings, going to forum, letting them know, like, oh, this is how we could get that done. You want a community center? This is how we can work together to get it done. You want a better environment on the Eastern Shore? This is how we can work together. So I loved that opportunity to go out, and I felt like, educating people, and especially going to parts of the state where they don't hear our political perspective, and letting them know that things can change, that what they were living with did not have to continue to be the same. So it was, to me, it was having that opportunity to bring that voice, to spark that conversation. I feel proud that many of the things that I talked about during the campaign, that I put out there, have actually wound up becoming law. I was the sponsor of the $15 minimum wage as a senator, and people are like, "Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy." And now it's
right.
You're almost like, if you're not on board with the $15 minimum wage, you're a conservative. So I really enjoyed that part. The hard part is, again, and you hear people talk about asking for money, and because it's not natural to go out and say, Cheryl, please give me money so I can pursue my dream. Like, I always compare fundraising to shoveling your driveway in snow. Like, as a kid, somehow it was always easier to shovel someone else's driveway than your own driveway. I've gone out there and I've asked for money for other people, for other causes, but when it's like, but give it to me, there's something that is difficult. And when you're running statewide, the amount of money you have to ask for, from the number of people, it goes up and up. And so that was a challenge that I wish I'd got that I wish I had been better at, because maybe things would have changed.
It needs to be a a mind shift rather than give money to me. It's, do you care about good government? Do you care about the environment, civil rights, good budget, great schools? You know, I mean, it's that, and I will be that advocate, and that's why it's worth donating to me, supporting this effort. But it's a hard pivot to make.
God, I wish I'd had this conversation with you in the fall of 17 instead of.
There you go. So before we leave the legislature, you mentioned minimum wage bill. I was going to ask you what your favorite bill. What's the bill you're proudest of sponsoring or passing?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is there are so many different things that I got to work on. And I always found great satisfaction in the budget bill every year, you know, because it's the one bill that has to pass,
right,
and assembling that whole thing. So, you know, if it was a policy goal and bill, you know, I would have to say it's the marriage equality bill, the same marriage equality for same-sex couples, which, you know, we were early on. I mean, I don't think people realize this. We were only the Maryland State Senate was only the second legislative body in the country to pass a marriage bill without a court order, right? That, you know, where we organized, we advocated, we spoke to colleagues, we built the coalition to get it done. And, you know, that was getting that done, getting it through the legislative process, defending it at the ballot box, becoming the first state to adopt it because polls close an hour earlier in Maryland than they do in Maine.
Right.
But Governor O'Malley trademarked, you know, they were the first of voters to do it.
Right.
And then to have that be the law that, you know, I don't know if people realize this, the Supreme Court decision, which then legalizes marriage equality for same-gender couples for the whole country, as an Ohio couple coming to Maryland to get married and then going back to Ohio and asserting their rights with that marriage license and eventually working up to the Supreme Court. So it's like those actions and that simple act of, in 2002, being the first openly gay person to run and win, and then to be there from the beginning. When I remember people were like, oh, we don't want to talk about civil unions.
Right.
You know, to go in 10 years,
right,
from don't bring it up to passing marriage,
right,
and then how it is then the foundation for a larger action for the whole country.
Right.
It's hard not to view that as a
extraordinary.
As achieve.
Well, I was going to ask later, but this is the time to talk about the fact that we're recording this during Pride Month 2021, and certainly in our lifetimes, the trajectory, the evolution of LGBTQ rights and people's comfort level, awareness of it, of differences and different kinds of families than they might have known when they were growing up. So talk briefly, if you would, about being married to wonderful Mark Hodge and having two beautiful children, Katie and Jackson, and just how you feel like you're role modeling and continuing to educate through your marriage and your family.
You bring it up at a very interesting time, because not only is it Pride Month, but I don't know if you have watched the show Pose on FX. It's been a brilliant show that has followed a group of individuals who are involved in the African-American drag ballroom scene in the late 80s and 90s, you know, where Madonna's Vogue, Strike a Pose, you know, it all sort of grows out of this movement, this artistic movement in New York City. And they're all the characters, several of the characters are my exact age, you know, so in 1985, they're 20 coming to New York. And then you start to see people are wrestling with HIV, AIDS, that whole, you know, and you realize as you're sitting there watching it with your kids and talking about, like, you know, you were frightened. I mean, just like we've lived through with the coronavirus. Oh my God, am I going to get it? Could this, that fear was real day in and day out. I don't mean to get emotional or go, but it's interesting because the series just ended.
Yeah.
And that's been very much a part of the storyline as they've gotten to like 1995. And then the change
Yes.
of what happened and how it changed the conversation about gay people.
Right.
And then as we move forward, people like you, it's so easy, I think, amongst Democratic elected officials to, talk about LGBTQ plus and not recognizing that it was not an easy issue in the Democratic caucus.
Mm-mm.
And there were brave people like you when you first came into the House of Delegates who said, yes, right away. I mean, this wasn't an issue. This wasn't a debate. You have to be convinced. There's an anti-discrimination bill. Of course I'm for it, and there were Sharon Grosfeld.
Let's give a shout out to Sheila Hickson, who championed that forever. I remember early co-sponsored, but every year she came back with that. And the first one was anti-discrimination in housing, public accommodations, and
employment.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. And that's such a no-brainer now, but it was seen as pretty radical.
Oh, absolutely. And she, it was her, and then it was a handful of co-sponsors, and it was, and it was just co-sponsors. I mean, I have to say what was remarkable was sorry, now I didn't realize my phone was so you told me to silence my cell phone, but not my desk phone. I wasn't thinking. So anyway, it was just, I mean, I think it's funny that people went, it was just Jewish women. It was a coalition of Jewish women and Black women from Montgomery County and Baltimore City that were the initial strong supporters. And then it grew. I mean, I remember trying to find white men who would take it on. Right. And Chris Van Hollen was that transformational person who was one of the first white men to stand up and say, I have political aspirations. But no one is going to cast dispersions on me. I'm going to stand up and talk about this because this is the right thing to do.
Yep.
And then when he did it, that also then was a tipping point. And Sharon Grosfeld put in the very first marriage equality bill right after the Hawaii Supreme Court decision. As a member of the House of Delegates in the 90s, she needed to have state police protection.
Oh my God.
For a week because of the attacks that came her way. Look at the transformation. And
now we're hoisting the pride flag.
I know. So
office building.
It is remarkable. In the year 2000, I say this to people because, for there were many young people, my daughter was born in 2002. In the year 2000, the only reference of gay people in the state law was to criminalize our behavior.
Yes.
Within a very short 2000, zero. I mean, we are below zero because it's criminalized. Right. We go from that to marriage.
Yeah.
In 12 years. The anti-discrimination bill for gay, lesbian, and bisexual.
Yep.
Then adding trans people to it. Then doing a safe schools bill, an anti-bullying bill, a hate crimes bill, and then marriage, then hospital visitation.
I was just going to bring that one up.
And then more rights, and then little bill, inheritance, joint property ownership, all of these things.
Hey,
and I remember
fertility parity, my first bill in the Senate, my first year in the Senate.
All of these little fights, which then finally got people to say, that's just rip off the Band-Aid, take the vote and move on.
Yeah. So let's move on. So let's pivot briefly to what you're doing now. Talk about being CAO of the county, especially during COVID.
Well, it's been a great honor to do this with Mark Elrich as county executive. I mean, Mark is someone who I've known for more than 2 decades, worked on a variety of issues. And then to deal with, I got this job in August of last year. So we were already well into COVID. So it's been the dominant thing, and just also remember it's the response to the healthcare crisis. And then it's the response to the economic crisis.
No question.
While at the same time wrestling with where our revenues going, what's happening, it was
what revenue coming in from
and
the government.
And, I mean, thankfully, strong Democratic leaders in the U.S. Congress.
Yes.
I mean, when you talk about, like, for us from Montgomery County, Chris Van Hollen, Ben Cardin, Jamie Raskin, John Sarbanes, David Trump. I mean, people who said, we learned the lesson from 2008. You don't do a stimulus bill half-ass, right? You protect people, and by protecting people and not making the damage worse by letting state, local governments fall apart and then lay off people and make the hole even bigger. Right. You support through the crisis so you can come back stronger than ever. And thankfully, we at the beginning, when people were running around saying, oh, this is worse than 2008, we're going to have to do this and this and this, Mark Elrich remained calm. And I mean, to me, with him trying to say, there's no, we don't need to decimate county government as our first action. In fact, we need to stabilize things. Congress is going to come through. They did repeatedly, even during the Trump administration, but now with the American Rescue Plan, to really stabilize the whole situation. And we did not have to make things worse.
Yes, yes. Okay, so before we need an authority line here, is a campaign pitch for the county executive.
For Cheryl Kagan?
No. So is there, I want to shift to the fast five, but let me just ask you, is there anything that I haven't talked to you about that you want to share before we start to wrap?
It's old, it's obscure, and it's about me. Okay. But one of the things, it's funny, it was reminded when I was asked about how I got in this line of work, and especially with my daughter now thinking about like what career choices and talking to her. I don't know if you knew this, other people know this. My bachelor's major, Soviet studies. I wanted to go work. I wanted to go work for the CIA or the NSA, and I was in my junior year when I discovered that they did not give security clearance to gay people. That was a question. That was a question on the lie detector test. In order to get security clearance, it just was a game changer. Huh? Oh yeah, yes, that did change in the Clinton administration.
Especially if you're out, then there's not a blackmail here.
Right, but it got me to totally, like, this path I was on. It was like, wow. What? I can't be one and the same, and I don't want to. I don't want to put myself at risk. I don't want to have to deal with the internal struggle every day of, what.
Well, I'll tell you, it would be a hell of a life, a hell of a different life if you were dealing with Russian studies now. Can you imagine? Yeah. Well, anyway, okay. So with that, Rich Madaleno, here are your fast five quick questions with quick answers. First, what is your favorite place to go in Montgomery County?
Oh wow, I'm trying to think of all the different places because I spent so much time at Montgomery Mall.
Okay.
And it's so funny that I would give that's the answer that popped into my head first.
Okay, well, we'll take it. Second, what is a new hobby that you adopted during the pandemic?
Binge TV watching.
And what have you liked the best of that? Anything you would recommend?
Hollywood, a Ryan Murphy show called Hollywood, which was absolutely fascinating about gay people in Hollywood in the 1950s, late 40s, early 50s. Kind of follows Rock Hudson as a character.
Interesting. Okay. If you could go anywhere, travel anywhere in the world, where would you want to go?
Right now, I would love to go to Venice.
Nice. Okay. Beautiful.
Italy, to be clear. Venice, Italy, not
Yes,
Venice,
not Venice, California. Yes. I have been to both Venices, Venice Beach and Venice, Italy.
Me too.
Yay. If you could share a meal with anyone living or dead, whom would you choose?
FDR.
Nice. Good answer.
I really do think, I mean, that opportunity to talk about the New Deal. I mean, there are so many parallels. I have professionally found it fascinating.
Nice. And the fifth question, Rich, former Senator Rich Madaleno, what is your secret hidden superpower? What is something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
I think this is going to sound so stupid when I say it, but I think it's intuitively understand our revenues
Mhm.
and what's happening with our revenues without having to see all the documents, like seeing some things that are coming in. Like I remember the beginning of the 2008 recession when the sales tax numbers started to go down, like, holy
Uh-oh, right.
crap, this is a huge problem. And I remember early on, like trying to say, we've got to be changing course.
Right.
And then this go around, like when people are like, oh my God, this is a disaster. It's like, no, look at some of the fundamentals. They're not changing. So.
Okay. Well, that's great. We're blessed. So, Rich, thank you.
Because it's certainly not my fashion style. That is not.
Thank you for all you do today for the county. Thank you for your remarkable career helping our state. Thank you for being a role model and a leader in the LGBTQ movement. Thank you just for everything, and for being a friend and a confidant and ally. You're remarkable, and I really appreciate having the chance to kibitz with you today.
Well, and Cheryl, thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done. I mean, you've been out there as a leader on so many issues, on big issues like protecting a woman's right to choose, to little life-saving critical issues, the 911 system. I mean, you are out there on issues that sometimes are of national importance, sometimes are of critical importance that people don't even think about.
Right. Thank you.
Elections. I mean, you've been out there talking about election equipment and the need for sensible election equipment before. I mean, fortunately, in a sane way. I mean, the nice part, always in a sane way.
Right.
So, but thank you for everything that you've done and what you've done for me in my life. I mean, you were an early supporter in 2002. So I greatly appreciate the ability to continue to work with you to improve our community.
Awesome. Well, here's to continuing to do that, Rich. All the best to you. Stay well.
You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.